We gather here today to honor Private Jewett Williams as he makes his final journey home. His homecoming is indeed an event to celebrate. This unassuming courthouse village stands not just as a symbol of war's end, but as a point of departure for a transformed nation. In no way does the power and importance of Appomattox come to us more vividly than it does by walking the streets of the village, standing in Mr. McLean's parlor, or by bearing witness with our mind's eye to this triangle where we gather today. More than 150 years ago, on April 12, 1865, as a result of General Robert E. Lee's surrender to Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant 3 days earlier at the McLean House, the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia Infantry was required to formally surrender its military equipment. They stacked their arms one last time, making them eligible to be paroled and to begin their journeys home. The Confederate soldiers marched into this village to be greeted by the 1st Division of the Federal Corps, lining this road, the Richmond-Lynchburg Stage Road. 14 regiments, approximately 5,000 Union soldiers. One of those regiments on the road that day was the 20th Maine Infantry, and they stood along this section of road. In fact, they stood on the south side of the road where many of you are sitting or standing today, right at this very moment. And of course, one of those soldiers standing here on that day was 21-year-old Private Jewett Williams. In a time when so many issues seem to divide us as Americans, here at Appomattox, we bear witness to the legacies of so many Civil War soldiers, like Jewett Williams, who produced the fiber that has yielded a special fabric that binds us together 151 years later.
But 6 months by the time he came to Appomattox. And here's an example. He serves as an example of the things that soldiers then suffered afterwards. For them, Appomattox was the end of what caused the suffering, the end of the source of their suffering, but it was certainly not, for those who survived the war, the end of their suffering. This is what Jewett Williams said about his illnesses and experience. Before I went in the Army, I worked on a farm and never was sick. Only a little cold now and then, till I went in the Army. I have been sick more or less. I hain't been in the Army since July 1865, but in 1883 he said since he joined the Army he has been sick almost entirely. Since I came out of the Army I have lived and worked in several places. I have never kept any account of days or months or even year of the places and worked for anything I could get to do. Sometimes sawed wood for 50 cents a day, sometimes drove team or what I could get. Despite these sicknesses, Private Williams was never listed as absent or unfit for duty during his 9 months of service to his country. After the war, these illnesses led to chronic diseases of the rectum, heart, kidneys, and stomach. As he aged, his left eye developed a chronic ulcer that obstructed his whole vision. For all of this, the government paid him a standard soldier's invalid pension of $8 a month. A laborer, Williams traveled originally from Maine and then left soon after the war, living in Michigan, Minnesota, Colorado, Washington, and finally Oregon in search of work. When admitted to the Oregon State Hospital for the Insane in 1922, records described him as a debilitated old man, 78 years of age. Quote, the records quote, has a general and severe arterial sclerosis with resulting loss of memory, has a hypertrophic prostate, has a bilateral inguinal hernia. He is not able to take care of himself and must have assistance all of the time. He does not see well and is almost deaf. He has no memory and does not know what he says. In short, he is practically listless. All of these years after his service, these are the kinds of things that Jewett Williams was suffering because of what had happened to him during the course of the war. Next month, we will hold the last funeral ever held for a member of the 20th Maine, and perhaps the last one for any Civil War veteran. It was with this in mind that Joshua Chamberlain, nearly a quarter century after the surrender, reflected on places like this and the things that soldiers had done here, and moments like we are taking part in today, and he looked ahead to the events like this one. His words, I think, help explain why we are all here today. It's a bit prophetic. This was from 1889. In great deeds, something abides. On great fields, something stays. Forms change and pass, bodies disappear, but spirits linger to consecrate the ground for the vision place of souls. And reverent men and women from afar, and people who know not us and we know not of, heart drawn to see where and by whom great things were said and done for them, shall come to this deathless field to ponder and dream. And lo, the shadow of a mighty spirit shall wrap them in its bosom, and the power of that vision shall pass into their souls.
This is the great reward of service, to live far out and on in the life of others. This is the mystery of Christ, to give life's best for such high sake that it shall be found again unto life eternal. Joshua Chamberlain. And again, we thank Private Jewett Williams, Company H, the 20th Maine Infantry, for his service to our country, and may God bless the state of Maine and Virginia and these United States of America. Thank you.
This single symbolic musket firing serves to honor the service and safe return home of Private Jewett Williams.
Soldier! Halt! Soldier!